As we've seen, the Industrial Revolution, along with technological advances in printing and type design, led to an explosion in the mass production of printed materials, namely books, magazines, and posters. But this huge increase in printed matter led to a decline in the actual quality of book design and production. William Pickering was one of the few standouts who kept in place a clear separation between the design and the production of books, keeping a tight control over all stages of the process. As publisher, he worked closely with his printers and provided quality control over type choice and illustrations. He collaborated especially well with printer Charles Whittingham to produce standout examples such as Pickering's 53-volume series Aldine Poets, shown here. The Diamond Classics were a series of miniature books produced by Pickering between 1820 and 1826, set in the minuscule diamond type produced by Charles Corral. My particular favorite of Pickering's designs was his 1847 edition of Oliver Burns' The Elements of Euclid, which featured woodblock diagrams in primary colors to replace their traditional alphabet labeling. To me, they foreshadow both the look of modern textbook design and the work of P.A. Mondrian. There was a beautiful facsimile of the book published in 2012 by Taschen Press, quite a tribute to a 173-year-old mathematics text. Despite Pickering's efforts, the decline in the quality of book design continued till the end of the 19th century, when a revival in design began, fueled by the new arts and crafts movement, led by William Morris in England. More about him in a bit. The reaction and pushback to the confusion of the Industrial Revolution, that cultural and societal earthquake we examined previously, owed much of its guiding philosophy to writer and artist John Ruskin. In his 1859 essay, The Two Paths, he wrote, "Manufacture is, according to the etymology and right use of the word, the making of anything by hands, directly or indirectly, with or without the help of instruments or machines. Art is the operation of the hand and the intelligence of man together. Then fine art is that in which the hand, the head, and the heart of man go together." He asked how society could improve the lives of the masses and provide them with a happier existence. He believed that the medieval Gothic cathedral had been the perfect example of an ideal union between design and construction, and that after the Renaissance, the roles of art and society had diverged, with industrialization accelerating the process and isolating the artist. He claimed that the result was haphazard reliance on outdated historical models, declining creativity, and design by engineers with no aesthetic concerns. He believed that beautiful things were valuable and useful things could be beautiful. He advocated improved housing for workers, a national educational system, and retirement benefits for the elderly. This call for social services was way ahead of its time and saw its ultimate development a century later with FDR's New Deal. His writing caught the eye of William Morris, the eldest son of a wealthy wine importer. Morris grew up in a Georgian mansion located right on the edge of Epping Forest, and it is easy to see why young William was subject to daydreams of living in medieval times. Epping Forest is a near 6,000-acre area of ancient woodland outside of London. Over a dozen films have taken advantage of the Epping Forestscape, including this scene, You Might Know, shot for the film Monty Python and the Holy Grail. While also known for being the scene of various criminal activity over the years, young William fell under the spell of the forest in his attempt to escape psychologically from the encroaching industrialization of the country. In 1853, Morris entered Exeter College and met Edward Burne-Jones, who would remain a lifelong friend. They ended up traveling to France in 1855 and abandoned their original plans of entering the ministry to become artists. That turned out to be a fortunate decision for the world of art and design. After graduation, Morris joined the architectural firm of G.E. Street, where he met a pivotal figure in his artistic evolution, his supervisor, Philip Webb. Morris found himself bored working at the restrictive firm and left, able to survive quite handily on his family's wealth. He joined his friend Burne-Jones in the pursuit of a career in painting, and they both fell under the influence of Dante Gabriel Rossetti, a leading pre-Raphaelite painter. The name Pre-Raphaelite refers to the group's opposition to the Royal Academy's promotion of the Renaissance master Raphael. They were also in revolt against the triviality of the immensely popular genre painting of the time. Inspired by the theories of John Ruskin, who urged artists to go to nature, the group, known as the Brotherhood, believed in an art of serious subjects treated with maximum realism. Their principal themes were initially religious, but they also used subjects from literature and poetry, particularly those dealing with love and death. They also explored modern social problems. Its principal members were William Holman Hunt, John Everett Millais, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti. After initial heavy opposition, the Pre-Raphaelites became highly influential, with a second phase of the movement from about 1860 inspired particularly by the work of Rossetti, making major contributions to symbolism. Morris struggled with his painting. His career was ultimately to focus on design, but he did end up marrying one of Rossetti's favorite models, the alluring Jane Burden, daughter of an Oxford stableman. Jane Morris would go on to be known as much more than Rossetti's muse and William Morris's wife. She ended up leading a very interesting life and having a fascinating career. When it came time to establish their new home, Morris turned to his old friend Philip Webb to design it. Webb responded with a truly revolutionary design, which abandoned the typical rectangular floor plan for one with an L-shaped layout, which relied on a functional response to the need of the new owners. Red House was the result, and it remains a pivotal point in the path to modern architecture. When Morris found that the traditional Victorian furnishing available for purchase did not meet his needs, he set out to design his own. He ended up designing and supervising the installation of wallpaper, stained glass, tapestry, and furnishings for his new house. With the knowledge and experience he acquired thus, he and a few friends established the art decorating firm of Morris, Marshall, Faulkner and Company in 1861. With showrooms in London and teams of craftsmen in its employ, Morris produced hundreds of designs for wallpaper, textiles, carpets, and tapestries. Natural forms of plants, animals, and birds dominated his designs. 14 years later, in 1875, the firm reorganized as Morris and Company, with Morris as the sole owner. The desire for social change was an essential part of the new movement. During the 1880s and 1890s, the arts and crafts movement was supported by a growing number of societies and guilds, seeking to establish democratic artistic communities united for the common good. One such group was the Century Guild, led by a young architect, Arthur McMurdo, who had met William Morris when McMurdo was only 26 and Morris was 43. After a couple of trips to Italy in 1878 and 1880, he formed the Century Guild in London in 1882, consisting of a group of young designers and artists who were about 20 years younger than Morris's group. The new group included designer-illustrator Selwyn Image and designer and writer Herbert P. Home. This group incorporated Renaissance and Japanese design ideas into their work. Featuring work of guild members, the Century Guild Hobby Horse began publication in 1884. It was the first finely printed magazine devoted solely to the visual arts. I find the design and layout of this publication enchanting. The designs of Image and Home skew towards the medieval and look backwards, but McMurdo's swirling images foreshadow the coming Art Nouveau movement. When McMurdo shared a copy of the Hobby Horse with William Morris, Morris's passion for typography and page design was ignited. Sir Emery Walker, master printer and typographer at the Chiswick Press, served as the guiding force behind the production of the Hobby Horse. The attention paid to the layout and type design are characteristic of the growing private press movement. The Hobby Horse appeared quarterly and ran from 1884 through 1894, spanning a total of 7 volumes and 28 issues. Although it received plenty of commissions, the Century Guild disbanded in 1888, 6 years after its formation, as members began focusing more on individual projects. A number of groups and individuals concerned with the craft revival continued to form the Art Workers Guild in 1884. A splinter group formed the Combined Arts Society with artist-illustrator Walter Crane as its first president, and by 1888 the group had changed its name to the Arts and Crafts Exhibition Society. Early exhibitions sponsored by the group included demonstrations and lectures, including William Morris on tapestry weaving, Walter Crane on design, and Emery Walker on book design and printing. Inspired by these lectures, William Morris himself decided to devote himself to type design and the printing of beautiful books. Based on research, including sources from his own collection of incunabula books, the name given to the category of books printed by hand before 1500, he designed his first typeface, Golden. Golden was based on the Venetian Roman faces designed by Nicholas Jensen between 1470 and 1476. Morris took photos of examples and blew them up to carefully analyze these old incunabula letter forms. From the resulting drawings, metal punches were made. His first book project for his newly established Kelmscott Press, and for which he designed the logo, was The Story of the Glittering Plane by William Morris, with illustrations by Walter Crane. The first print run was 200 copies on paper and 6 on vellum. Between 1891 and 1898, the Kelmscott Press produced 18,000 copies of 53 different titles. The books were characterized by their skillful hand printing, handmade paper, hand-cut woodblocks, and decorative initials and borders. The book had become an art form. Ironically, the price of these private press editions were well beyond the affordability of the general public, whose consumption of cheaply printed books had initially inspired the arts and crafts movement. Among the outstanding editions produced by the Kelmscott Press was the 556-page Works of Geoffrey Chaucer. 4 years in the making, the book contained 87 woodcut illustrations from drawings by Morris's old friend Burne-Jones, and 200 initial letters and words designed by Morris himself. 4 months after the first printed copies were delivered, William Morris died on October 3, 1896, at the age of 62.
This is the first Kelmscott edition of the works of Geoffrey Chaucer, printed in Hammersmith in 1896, and it's a magnificent copy. My name is Adam Douglas, and I'd like to show this copy to you in all its glory. Let me get a cushion here so I can show you the book itself. The Kelmscott Press was owned by William Morris, and this really is a high point of the arts and crafts movement in printing. It's one of the most beautiful books of the 19th century. Here's the opening spread. We see straight away that it's illustrated by the pre-Raphaelite artist Edward Burne-Jones. There are actually 87 of his illustrations throughout the book, and this magnificent vine leaf decoration around the opening spreads. As we go through, we see that every little detail has been thought through. The red printing here in the side notes, and these wonderful woodcut capitals introducing each section. We were lucky enough actually to have a proof that Morris had been drawing these woodcut initials. When I first saw this book, I assumed that maybe there would be 26 different initials, but in fact, even on this page, you can see that the A here is different to the A here. And Morris designed dozens of different designs for each of these letters. So as we go through, the book periodically opens out into these wonderful double-page spreads. Every single detail of the book was thought through. The paper is wonderful linen paper. By this stage in the 1890s, commercial book producers were beginning to put wood pulp into their paper, which goes acidic and brown. But this is pure linen paper. Morris even designed the watermark for it, which he based on a 15th century original. And so the book has all that craftsmanship of the medieval era, but brought up into the 19th century with these beautiful designs. The type was designed by Morris. All the Kelmscott Press books are printed in types designed by him or close associates of his, but this is his masterpiece, and it's the finest, the largest book of the press. It took 4 years to make the whole book. Burne-Jones drawing the designs, and William Morris used to go and chat to him on a Sunday as he drew them. And of course, they're illustrating the greatest medieval English writer, Geoffrey Chaucer. And so it speaks perfectly to Morris's campaign to revive the craftsmanship of the Middle Ages. Everything is illustrated all throughout. It's not just the Canterbury Tales. There's all Chaucer's works, Troilus and Crusade here, with these book titles opening out. And at the end, Kelmscott woven into the white vine leaf decoration there. And at the end, like a medieval book, of course, a colophon telling us exactly when the book was finished. It was printed by me, William Morris, at the Kelmscott Press, Upper Mall, Hammersmith, finished on the 8th day of May, 1896. And a splendid piece of work it is. Now, the book was issued originally in a binding that you might think of as provisional. It's a simple binding, the original binding, of blue boards with a linen spine. The difficulty with that is it's such a large book, almost disappearing behind it, that binding simply doesn't work very well. And the idea was that people who wanted to could commission a better binding. This binding was one of about 50 similar bindings done by the Doves Bindery, who were next door to the Kelmscott Press in Chiswick Mall. And they were very much in tune with the Kelmscott Press and shared some of the same personnel. So there's one of about 50. It's a white pigskin binding, alum tawed pigskin rather than a tanned leather, which was a typical medieval leather used for medieval books before the invention of printing even. In fact, the design here was copied from a 1478 Coburger Bible that Morris had in his own collection, which you can see that it's been customized so that it says Geoffrey Chaucer at the top and Kelmscott at the bottom. It's also signed inside the binding at the back, at the foot of the rear turn-in, the Doves Bindery, 1897, which is one of the earlier ones. You can see also the detail of the gilt edges here, where the gilt has been applied onto the rough edges of the leaves, which is a rather nice, rather than a sort of machine finished edge. The natural edges of the paper are gilded. And then, like a good medieval book, it has clasps to keep the book closed. Burne-Jones called the book a pocket cathedral. It's so full of design. And this copy with its matching binding really is a superb example of the finest book of the Kelmscott Press.
The private press movement continued on, with diminishing energy into the 20th century. Some of the practitioners who harkened back to the arts and crafts aesthetic included Charles R. Ashby, who founded Essex House Press. Ashby also ran a group called the Guild of Handicraft. The press is named after the London workshops of the Guild at Essex House on the Mile End Road in the East End of London. Ashby bought the Kelmscott Press's Albion printing presses after William Morris's death and employed one of the Kelmscott compositors, Thomas Binning. Ashby was keen to carry on the work of Morris's press. The Essex House Press moved with the Guild to Chipping Campden in 1902 and produced 84 titles. The Essex House Psalter is a prime example of the production of the press. The Doves Press Bible produced in 1903, was known for its austere design in reaction to what was considered the over-design of the earlier arts and crafts publications. No illustrations or ornament distracted from the text. An American, Elbert Hubbard, met Morris in 1894 and was inspired to found Roycroft Press and Roycroft Shop in East Aurora, New York. This establishment still exists. It became a huge tourist attraction with 400 employees producing artistic home furnishings, copperware, leather goods, and printed materials. The look of his books, inspirational booklets, and 2 magazines were based directly on Kelmscott Press productions. May Morris, William Morris's daughter, called Hubbard an obnoxious imitator of her father. One of the standout examples from the Roycroft Press was designed by Lewis Reed. The essay on Walt Whitman was published in 1900 by Roycroft Press. As luck would have it, a copy has come down to me through my family, and here it is. It's very fragile, and glue has dried up on the inside of the binding, but it's a good candidate for restoration. As you can see, the pages are fairly brittle. There is a little discoloration, but overall, the pages themselves are not bad. The binding cord has fairly much evaporated. It must be handled very, very carefully. It's taken a beating over the years. You can see the initial caps designed there. The wide outside margins, which are always very nice. And it's always nice to actually hold an artifact in your hands. Pages are rough cut, as they originally were meant to be. And I think this is actually the book plate that goes in the front. At first I thought it was a bookmark, but I noticed that there's a little shadow area in the front. And the inside is covered with a velvet on the inside, both front and back covers. It's really a nice item to be able to hold in your hands, as delicate as it is, as fragile as it is. Other leading private presses included those of Lucien and Esther Pizarro. And here we have examples from some of their publications, which included ornamental design combined with what has been described as an intense expressionistic energy. Here are pages from Ishtar's Descent to the Netherworld, published in 1903. Rudolf Koch was a German type designer who created typefaces for the Klingspor type foundry, including the very well-known faces Newland and Cabell, which are still in use today. Heavily influenced by William Morris, Koch could not believe that Morris was not of German descent. Frederick W. Goudy was an American printer, artist, and type designer. He designed, among many other faces, copperplate Gothic and Goudy Old Style. Goudy is clearly a modernist thinker who guaranteed that the ideals of the arts and crafts movement were actualized in printing for commerce well until the mid-20th century. Examples include the Caxton Book, the American Type Founders Specimen Book and Catalog, published in 1923. Here are some sample pages of Goudy type families of old-style fonts. And finally, to complete our examination of the influence of the arts and crafts movement, we turn to the designer Bruce Rogers, who is considered by some to be the greatest book designer of the 20th century. He rejected the use of modern sans serif fonts and adhered to a stately, formal design style that clearly echoed the aesthetic of centuries past. He is best known for his design of the typeface Centaur. And thus ends our look at the arts and crafts movement. Up next, Art Nouveau.